This is going to be the top 100 team for this rotation of Astromancer Alena. Rinak solo is actually not good enough for top 100, just because we are skipping out on a major feature of the fight, and that is why my score has jumped all the way to 67 million, almost 68. As usual, second week of Hall of Trials typically has it unequipped, so I would wait a week and wait until then to move your gear around so you can save on your gold. The thing that we are skipping is here in Art of Thievery, when the foremost ally has 5 or more buffs, all their buffs get removed, then the ally in the back, which is Rinak, gets an extra turn plus target weakness greater. Target weakness greater increases her speed by 40% and damage dealt by 1000%. This 1000%, at least on her S1, is a little bit reduced, just because she already has a bunch of extra damage dealt on her S1 after using S3, but this is still a very sizable increase. You can see how high my score jumped from my solo team compared to this one. And also, when the boss's break age ends, everyone's S3 gets reset. So this is just nice for sustain, and also for Rinak getting to go again. So this is the team that we will be using. And for alternatives, I haven't really looked at it too much. I'm willing to bet that Lots works over Emilia, probably. That I haven't checked. You can also see Carol used Infinite Horizon Acades. I think he was using Emilia earlier too, but he also tried Infinite Horizon Acades and it worked. I actually have no idea how this works, just because Infinite Horizon Acades S2 is Barrier, and Ruele already gives herself Barrier. Ruele can solo the 5 buffs, not solo, but if you S3 and then S2, that counts as 3 buffs. And then Doris can be 4 and 5, so maybe IHA just isn't contributing any buffs at all. I have no idea how this works, but I'm just going to be using Emilia. So all of these units here have 2 non-attack skills, so we can skip turns in the break phase and give all of the turns over to Rinak, or at least the hits. And then Ruele has Barrier plus damage limit on S2, and also, like I mentioned, Invincible on S3, though typically you're just S2ing. Doris has defense buff plus the regen buff, and Emilia has attack buff on S2. So these will be our 5 buffs. Ruele also has that little buff that she gets at the start of combat for her revive. I forgot it was called, but even though it's undispellable, it actually gets dispelled once you hit the first 5 buff limit. So you do need this 5th buff from Emilia later on. And then also, we're going to need sustain, of course. Pretty much all damage threat is on Rinak. So we have Doris S3, and also in case of emergency, Ruele S3, plus Emilia S3 as our healing. You do want to make sure that you don't overheal. You need to actually use S1s with these guys, just because the way that this fight works is when Alena uses her S2 rather, she puts Cajole on the front unit, and whenever the front unit uses a skill, they will push everybody, so Alena plus her 2 adds to 100%. This didn't happen when we were doing Rinak solo because whoever was in the front was dead. So you got a full turn of Alena to have Rinak go and do things, but here, because we actually have a unit in the front, which is going to be Ruele, when she uses her S1 after getting pushed up, Alena's going to immediately go too, so you essentially lose a full turn there. So you have to make sure you squeeze in as many S1s as possible. That's it for the general overview though, and let's take a look at everyone's stats. Starting off with Ruele, I do have her pretty fast. One of the main things in this fight is everybody needs to be pretty fast. But this defense isn't necessary. I just was really lazy about re-gearing her. I think I only changed like 1 piece. So HP is the important one because Alena full def pens. Besides that, you're going to want a good amount of speed. You can check which speed tunings work well for you. I would say you definitely need to be pretty fast though. I'm giving her Warhorn just for the bonus attack onto Rinak. The CR push doesn't work because nobody except for Rinak can benefit from CR pushes. So even if you find yourself needing more sustain and you swap this out for, let's say, Celestine, don't worry about your tunings being weird because the CR push never worked in the first place. Next up is Emilia. Emilia, I put her on Card of Small Miracles because Ruele is on Warhorn already. Of course, you can swap this out for something like Rod of Amaryllis or Unfading Memories if you find yourself needing more sustain. And then, same thing, I just made her pretty fast with a good amount of HP. The thing for me was I wanted Emilia faster than Ruele and slower than Rinak. Ruele and Emilia are in speed orange range of each other, but it doesn't really matter that much because it's just like the first turn. But this is just the general stat line you're aiming for in Emilia. It's just pretty fast with some HP. And then there is Doris. Doris, the speed, I had to change around a little bit just because there's a specific turn where I wanted Doris to move right before Ruele. So I had to lower her speed to get here. But then besides that, you can just give her a bunch of HP. I'm using Touch of Rekos for the sustain. This is just to help keep topped up after getting hit by some of the AoEs. And then if you find yourself not needing this, you can swap this out for Super Duper Water Shooter or something. Lastly is Rinak. Rinak, I still have her really fast. Even though we have 3 other units here, we need to take so many turns to remove the entire break gauge without actually playing with the counter mechanic that I had to make Rinak pretty fast at least. Maybe there's some way to slow her down. But besides that, you're going to want a lot of attack, and you're actually going to want a little bit of HP, just because you're going to take a lot of damage in the Alena pre-break mechanic part, where she uses S2, Ruele gets pushed up, Ruele uses S1, and then both adds use S1, then Alena uses S1. You take a lot of damage on that turn, and sometimes you'll die if you don't have enough sustain. So sustain artifacts on Emilia and Ruele can make it so you don't need as much bulk on Rinak, so that's just one thing to consider. For her artifact, I will be using Cruel Mischief, and then again, I opted to not even bother with the Torrent set. I just opted for more attack, just because we already have a lot of damage boost percent, so I figured Torrent wouldn't be that useful. We actually don't know exactly how much she's getting on her S1, but I figured it's large enough that I'm not going to bother with Torrent. That's enough for all of the stats and stuff though, and now we can take a look at her run. So starting off as usual with just S1, S3, S2, S1. Like I mentioned, because we have Ruele in the front slot here, it's a lot harder for us to get through this entire break gauge. So we are going to have to be pretty tight with our hits and our healing. We have to make sure we don't overheal and miss out on chances to actually hit Alena and reduce her gauge. So we're going to S3 with Emilia here, gets rid of the unhealable, plus heals a little bit. And then we will be using Ruele S1. This is for the CR push. And then after this, we're largely just going to be spamming S1s with everybody. Except for Rinak, of course, who is going to be doing her 3-2-1 combo. Because we have enough HP to survive, we won't be healing anymore. We will just be using S1s to reduce the gauge. Like I said, you want to make sure you don't overheal, because if you overheal, then you are not going to be able to enter the break phase properly. She's at here, 3 means that her next attack is going to be her S2. And with, or let's do the 3-2-1 first, but with having an actual unit in the front slot this time, it means that we have a lot less time to attack during the pre-break mechanic. Here Ruele goes. We are just going to S1. And you can see Alena instantly took a turn there, so that's -1 turn. Do note that if Ruele takes a turn again, you can see after using a skill, changes combat radius of all enemies to 100%. If Ruele somehow gets 2 turns, then Alena's going to instantly go again. So that is just worth keeping in mind. And we're just going to S1 again here. And now, when you have block on, you want to make sure you S1 first. And then we're gonna S3. Now we're in the break phase, and this is one of the parts that's a little bit scuffed. First we have to, or the part that's scuffed is Rinak being ahead of Doris. Ideally Doris would move before Rinak does, but we have to S2 Ruele with Ruele S2 here just to get rid of the block. You can only cleanse the block with the actual unit. So now we're going to, you can either S1 or S2 some random units. Your pushes don't work, but I'm going to S2 Rinak instead because she was going to move anyways, and this at least extends her attack buff a little bit. We're going to S1 here, wait one more turn. Doris S2. Now we have our greater target weakness. We also noticed that Ruele's undispellable buff got dispelled, so on the next two break phases we're going to have to use Emilia S2 on her as well. Just gonna use Ruele S3 to stall out a little bit more. We've got exactly 3 hits left, which would just be Rinak's S3, S2, S1 combo. It's also worth noting that in the Rinak solo, we don't make use of this, but when you have the greater target weakness, everyone's S3 gets reset when you go in. Or when you exit the break phase, rather. It doesn't really pop up here, but there is one really funny thing you can do when exiting the break phase that I'll show at the end of the run. You could force it here if you wanted to, but we're going for damage. And then here we'll push up Rinak. Since we don't have a debuff, we're just going to open with S3 instead of using S1. And then, like I said, we're not going to overheal. We don't need to use Ruele S3, so we're just not going to. Going to use Emilia S3 here to cleanse the unhealable. Again, just S1. Now Alena's gonna use her S2. And as usual, we just S1, and we tank all of the hits. So here, one big difference is that Alena's at 20% now instead of 15. So when we go, instead of breaking her with S2, we're gonna break her with our S1. Here we're gonna enter with S1 instead. This does cost us a little bit of damage, but it's not that big of a deal. Our turn order works out really nicely here though. We can Ruele S2 ourselves. Doris S2. And since her undispellable buff got dispelled, we have to use Emilia S2 on her for the 5th buff. And our target weakness greater is back, and we can start going. So here we have a choice to make. We have Ruele S3 and Doris S3 to use. CR pushes only work on Rinak. If you want the CR push Rinak, you can. I'm going to opt to not do that. Just so that when Rinak actually does finally take her turn, everyone else will be slightly higher up in the CR gauge. On this Doris turn, if I pushed up Rinak, she'd go immediately. And then it would be like Emilia would actually go first. So then Ruele, Doris, and Emilia would all be at the back when Rinak takes her turn. But here, we're just going to S3 Emilia instead. You'll see the CR push isn't actually going to work. Now we Emilia S3. Then when Rinak takes her turn, everybody got to move at least a little bit. And then here is an actual like situation where you might use the funny thing. If you use S2 here, it'll happen. But we're gonna S1 because this is higher damage. We're going to skip the S3 here because everybody's gonna get to go in time, so we aren't in a rush to heal Rinak or anything. Now we push up Rinak. And we can start doing our thing. This has happened at several points in the run already, but you also have the option of S2ing Rinak if you want. I don't, because it doesn't actually like give me an extra turn just because of the way the CR pushes work. Or Alena's CR pushes work. I'd rather just get the hit in. So we can S1 here. And then we'll do our usual Rinak combo. You also do have to keep in mind sometimes when you push Rinak into different places, it can mess with your tunings. Like if I had pushed Rinak, she'd be at 50% here, which would make your entry into the break phase pretty different. So then we are just going to S1 as normal. Just barely managed to tank it, it's fine. S1. 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 And just like that, we are into the final break phase. We get to start off with S1 here. Nice big damage chunk. And then we are going to use S2 on ourselves. And we have the S2 Ruele as well for the attack buff. And now we can S2 with Doris, this hits 5. And now we go. And we can just roll S3 anybody, it doesn't matter.
실력 좀 볼까? 精霊術の使い手はなめないことあるヒューマ연구의 성과를 보여드리죠. 물러서지 마세요. 맞설 힘을 드릴게요.
So we've only got one hit left. We're going to use Rinak S3. But we can get one final hit in, so we'll use our S1 real quick. And that's the fight. Here we are on the final hit of the break phase, and now let's take a look at the interesting thing you can do. So we are going to just use S3 here. It also works with S2. Basically, your extra turn will go in front of hers. So she is in her second phase now. This is her second phase gauge, and we can use S3 again. Alena uses her S3. And then we can use S1. And our S3 is back. So you can again S3 and now you can S2, S1. This pretty much gives you, like, immediately at the start of the hit, or at the start of the phase, though Alena is still gaining CR as you can see here. But this is an instant 5 hits at the start of the phase. If you're struggling to get enough hits in to end the break phase, or to end the main phase and get into the break phase, you could consider doing this and sacrificing some damage at the end of the break phases. But do keep in mind, you still have to get through phase 1. So that's it for this top 100 team. Honestly, this team was pretty fun. So it was mainly just speed tuning, and there wasn't really much RNG involved. So this entire rotation, honestly, getting the whole Rinak solo thing down, and then also having to do this one has been pretty nice. I think this rotation is horrible for free-to-play players, of course. Having the counter buff mechanic plus the AoE one is annoying. You can see Lucio is actually doing a proper run, where he has the AoE in Yuna, he has the counter buff from Kikarat, but the sustain is just really rough. But that's it for this video. I will see you guys in the next rotation.